We tend to associate handheld gaming with simplicity, stuff like puzzle games, Tetris, and simple platformers. And for the most part, this is a fair association to make, but some games defy the status quo. The Sega Game Gear, for example, while maintaining simplicity as a mantra, had a few RPGs that are certainly worth considering. I'll be sharing these in order of my least recommended to my most recommended. Let's take a look at some of the Game Gear RPGs. Despite being first on the list, this game isn't bad by any means. Let's consider Dragon Crystal. Released in 1990 for the Sega Game Gear and later for the Master System, which I didn't know until I was researching a little bit for this video, Dragon Crystal is a roguelike dungeon crawler that is a mix of action combat, exploration, and survival element. As one of the earliest portable roguelikes, the game brings a challenging and randomized adventure that requires strategy, patience, and a bit of luck. And if you're anything like me, you probably thought this sounded like a personal hell, a retro roguelike on the Sega Game Gear. Okay, sure. But the experience was quite different from my expectations in a very good way. While its mechanics are quite simple compared to modern roguelikes, Dragon Crystal is an engaging and addictive experience, especially for players who enjoy the unpredictable nature of procedurally generated dungeons. And this is coming from someone who generally doesn't really enjoy roguelike elements. You know what, Sam? Maybe I do like green eggs and ham. The game begins with a player character mysteriously transported into a strange labyrinth after encountering a magical crystal ball. This is a nice way of saying, "Welcome to hell!" But for real, it just throws you into the action. No story, no introduction, nothing. Well, what does the instruction manual say? Maybe it's in there. Oh, okay, here we go. One late afternoon, as you ride down the same old street on your bike, you see an alley you've never noticed before. You make a turn thinking it could be a shortcut home. Whistling your favorite tune, you pedal down the alley. All of a sudden, a small antique shop jumps into your sight. You park your bike and enter the musty shop. The first thing that grabs your attention is a mysterious light coming from what seems to be a crystal ball on a dust-covered shelf. You approach the crystal. You gaze into it until a powerful unknown force pulls you in. And that's basically you now in the game. This was definitely a game where they probably made it and said, we need some sort of story to go with it, don't we? Look, the story isn't quite something to write home about by any means, but it's not necessary for enjoyment. I played this game and enjoyed it long before I even thought to check the manual for a story. Anyway, we're here now, we're in the game, right? With no clear way to escape, the player must navigate through 30 increasingly difficult dungeon floors, battling monsters, collecting equipment, and uncovering the mysteries of the labyrinth. Adding to this wild intrigue, a dragon egg follows the player throughout the journey, gradually growing as they progress, eventually hatching into a powerful companion. Gameplay revolves around navigating through the labyrinth and walking into combat. Every step or action taken by the player prompts the enemies to move in response. This mechanic requires some strategic thinking, as careless movement can result in being surrounded or outmatched by enemies, which is often how I found myself. This game is notable for its randomly generated dungeon layouts, meaning no two playthroughs are ever the same. Each floor contains various weapons, armor, scrolls, and potions, many of which are unidentified when first picked up. Now, this introduces an element of risk in the game, as some items may have negative effects, forcing players to experiment or rely on trial and error. This basically means you are walking around walls until you find an opening and you go in that direction. Sometimes it means you're using randomly colored books to see what they do. It's a mystery. Like many RPGs, in Dragon Crystal, killing enemies levels you up, making you stronger, increasing your stats, you know the shtick. You can collect armor that makes you stronger, which of course is standard RPG fare. Additionally, once you reach a certain level, the growing dragon egg will hatch and the companion will provide passive benefits, aiding the player as it matures. The challenge of Dragon Crystal comes not just from the combat, but also from resource management. Players must keep track of their food supply, as running out of food will cause you to die. Well, yeah, that makes sense, right?
Lay off me, I'm starving!
This adds a little survival aspect to the game. The inability to return to previous floors means that every decision matters, and wasting valuable resources can lead to an untimely demise. Death is permanent, and since the game lacks a save feature, failure means starting over from the beginning, reinforcing the roguelike nature of the experience. However, if you have enough gold, you can continue the game. If you don't have enough gold, hey, I guess you're cooked. Visually, Dragon Crystal is simple but effective, with colorful sprites and clear dungeon layouts that make navigation easy despite the limited screen resolution of the Game Gear. Enemy designs are distinct, and while animations are minimal, they serve their purpose. And that's really the best I can say. It's not particularly an impressive bit of graphical design. That's not the strength of the game. Rather, it's the gameplay. Walking around the mazes, finding your way into new rooms, fighting the enemies, being strategic in approaching the enemies, trying out new items, finding new swords. This is the fun of the game. The soundtrack, though repetitive, features catchy retro melodies that fit the mysterious and adventurous tone of the game. While Dragon Crystal is a rewarding and engaging dungeon crawler, it does have some drawbacks. The lack of a save feature can be quite frustrating, especially given the game's difficulty and randomness. Oh, so you picked up a brown book and it poisoned you. That's a bummer. Bad luck. Consequently, as just stated, item identification can feel overly punishing at times, as some negative effects, such as cursed equipment, can ruin an otherwise successful run. Oh, you like that sword? I sure hope you do, because you are never letting go of it. The absence of a deep narrative or variety in dungeon themes may also make the experience feel a little repetitive to some players. But hey, it's a roguelike, so I guess that's to be expected to at least some degree. Of course, not to be that guy, but if you're emulated, save scumming can really help you out with this one. It becomes less about luck and more about strategy. Make sure that you're saving often, and just reload if you have some bad luck with an item or whatever. If you're on real hardware though, it makes you question if you really want to open that green book. The game was apparently pretty well regarded in its time and now. I honestly did not anticipate that in the least. I played the game before I knew anything about it, and I just assumed that I was having a good time and being wildly forgiving of any issues. I do tend to look at the brighter side with retro games after all, but I found it really addictive and fun. In trying to experience what the Game Gear had to offer in terms of RPGs, I kept coming back to Dragon Crystal because it was just so enjoyable. I just assumed at that point I was a psychopath and didn't know any better. But it turns out that, other people like it too. Maybe I actually do have some kind of discerning taste in video games. I was beginning to wonder. Yay, maybe I'm not an idiot. Dragon Crystal's blend of strategy, randomness, and resource management creates a satisfying challenge that encourages players to learn from their mistakes and improve with each attempt, or, simply to save state. For Game Gear enthusiasts looking for a unique and addictive adventure, or for roguelike fans that want to see some early examples of the genre, Dragon Crystal is a rewarding, albeit unforgiving, journey into the depths of the unknown. I don't know that I can call this next game less recommended or more recommended, really. It's just so odd and fun. I 100% recommend this game, but maybe not for the right reasons. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll probably understand why I would recommend it. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, please don't close it out yet. It's Axe Battler, A Legend of Golden Axe. Sometimes I like games that are just not fantastic. That being said, I didn't want to put this as the first game as I was afraid you'd check out on me and say, you know what, this isn't even an RPG, but hold tight. We're getting to the rest of the RPGs on the system. Released in 1991 for the Sega Game Gear, Axe Battler, A Legend of Golden Axe attempts to bring the beloved Golden Axe franchise into the realm of action-adventure gaming with some RPG elements. Now, this would have fit more appropriately on an almost RPGs list like I made for the Super Nintendo, but shoot, there's not really much I can put on there for the Game Gear besides this. Axe Battler would have been pretty lonely, I would think. I digress. While Axe Battler, A Legend of Golden Axe shares the setting and lore of the original beat-em-up series, this handheld entry takes a very, very different approach, incorporating a mix of overhead exploration, side-scrolling combat, and light RPG mechanics. The result is a sincerely fun game with intriguing ambitions that struggles with clunky mechanics and some repetitive gameplay. But that's not going to stop Axe Battler. The story of Axe Battler, that's actually his name by the way, Axe Battler is the character's name, is a standard sword and sorcery fare. The legendary Golden Axe has been stolen by Death Adder.
That son of a
and the King of Firewood Castle has put Axe Battler on the job to return it. And so it's up to Axe Battler, a powerful, virile, barbarian warrior, lover of women and leader of men, to retrieve it and restore peace to the land. Unlike the original beat-em-up games, which featured multiple playable characters, this game focuses solely on Axe Battler. And can you blame him, really? The King of Firewood Castle sends him on a lone journey through a medieval world filled with monsters, treacherous landscapes, and townsfolk offering cryptic advice or vapid encouragement. Oh, that makes me feel fantastic, man. Thank you so much. I, Axe Battler, can now continue. Gameplay is divided into 3 primary sections: an overhead world map, side-scrolling battle sequences, and town interaction. The overworld is reminiscent of early RPGs, with Axe Battler traveling between locations while encountering random battles. When an enemy appears, the game shifts to a side-scrolling action screen where players engage, we'll call it, and one-on-one combat, we'll call it, using a basic set of sword slashes and jump attacks. Now, I say it this way because, it's not great. It's not miserable, don't get me wrong, but it's not the best part of the game. Towns serve as hubs where players can gather information, replenish their health, and stock up on magic, though the dialogue is minimal and offers little depth. Oh yeah, thanks guys, you're really helping a guy out here. I appreciate you. One of the game's biggest drawbacks is its combat system, we'll call it. Unlike fluid, fast-paced action of the original Golden Axe, the side-scrolling fights in Axe Battler feel sluggish, a little unresponsive at times, and sometimes unfair. The hit detection can be pretty inconsistent, leading to frustrating encounters where enemy attacks seem just unavoidable. Magic, which is a staple of the Golden Axe series, is present but limited, requiring players to collect magic pots scattered throughout the world, from battles and whatever. Given that magic is often the most effective way to deal with tougher enemies, the limited availability of these resources can make some encounters feel unnecessarily difficult. On a side note, I found it a bit odd that if I was in a one-on-one fight with something, if it hit me, the game would drop me out of the fight. It kind of made me feel like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump when Forrest pulls him out of the battlefield.
What are you doing? Just leave me here! Get away! Just leave me here! Get out!
The platforming sections of the game add variety, but they're hindered by stiff controls. Axe Battler's jump mechanics feel imprecise, as holding up makes you jump higher once you have the ability for it. It's just an odd feeling. Along with this, many platforming segments demand precise timing, leading to frequent falls and unnecessary frustration. Now, the levels aren't particularly long or anything, but if you fall down enough times, you're going to get a little frustrated. Since the game includes limited lives and continues, players may find themselves restarting from the beginning more often than they'd like. And while the game isn't horribly long and there is a password system in the towns, restarting still sucks. Visually, Axe Battler is fine. It's fine for a Game Gear title. It's not the most visually impressive game on this list for sure, but it's not glaringly bad by any means. Sprite work is detailed, and the environments, while repetitive, are well designed for the hardware. The game does a good job of capturing the fantasy aesthetic of the Golden Axe universe, including these little pink boogers here. This being said, the enemy variety is lacking quite a bit, with many encounters feeling recycled. That's probably the best word for it. Fought a lot of skeletons, I did. The soundtrack is it's okay. It's fine. It doesn't really stand out compared to other games in the franchise, offering a few forgettable melodies that loop a little more frequently than one might want. Despite its flaws, Axe Battler, A Legend of Golden Axe, has a certain nostalgic charm. For fans of the Golden Axe series, it offers an interesting, if flawed, look at an attempt to expand the franchise beyond its arcade roots. The mix of RPG and action mechanics could have worked with tighter controls and better combat design, but as it stands, the game feels more like a missed opportunity than a must-play classic. Unless you find yourself just drawn to it. I say this all with the understanding that I think everyone should play it. You should play it. I really wanted to honor this game and put Axe Battler on the thumbnail, but I was concerned that this didn't make enough sense considering this is a list about RPGs and this is the least RPG-like game on here. Well, it was that, and I didn't know if we all handled the raw sexual energy of having Axe Battler on the thumbnail. He would have had to have been shirtless. There's just no avoiding that. Overall, Axe Battler is an ambitious but flawed action-adventure title with some RPG elements. While it captures the spirit of Golden Axe in its setting and premise, its clunky combat, frustrating platforming, and repetitive gameplay make it a tough sell for anyone but the most dedicated fans of the series or curious people. Those looking for a polished RPG experience on the Game Gear might be better served by other titles on this list. However, for players willing to overlook some shortcomings, Axe Battler offers a unique, if uneven, adventure in the Golden Axe universe. Okay, so the next game is actually a true-to-form RPG, and I recommend it over the last two if you're looking for that RPG experience. This one feels very true-to-form, and it will be enjoyable for just about anybody that enjoys RPGs. I'm talking about Crystal Warriors. Released in 1991 for the Sega Game Gear, Crystal Warriors is a turn-based strategy RPG that came out long before many of the genre's more well-known titles. It may not have the same level of depth as Shining Force or Fire Emblem, but it offers a solid tactical experience using a rock, paper, scissors setup like Fire Emblem and Pokemon. Unlike Pokemon's types, this one focuses on elements. Fire is strong against wind, wind is strong against water, you get the idea. As one of the earlier handheld strategy RPGs, Crystal Warriors gives us an interesting glimpse into the evolution of the genre, providing an accessible yet engaging experience for fans of tactical combat, all in this handheld, convenient package. I can see where this would have been a solid pack-and-play setup due to the simplicity of it. The story of Crystal Warriors is fairly standard for an early 90s RPG. The kingdom of Ariel has been overrun by the evil Jinn and his army, who have stolen 3 of the 4 elemental crystals that maintain balance in the land. The player controls Princess Iris, the last hope of Ariel, as she gathers an army of warriors to reclaim the crystals and restore peace. While the plot is serviceable, it is largely there to provide context for the battles and doesn't feature the character-driven depth seen in later tactical RPGs. Actually, it's a bit of a stretch to even say it doesn't cover character dev. The game has literally zero character development. The story is sandwiched at the beginning of the game, and as I saw, there wasn't anything for the length that I played after that, which made me wonder. When I looked up the ending for the game, it turns out that there isn't anything beyond that. There's the beginning story, gameplay, and then just the ending of the game. That's the story. This isn't typically favored nowadays, but the game got favorable reviews years ago, and to be fair, I do keep saying I value gameplay over story, and the gameplay is solid, even if the story isn't there. Well, I mean, there isn't much there, I should say. Like a big, thick bologna sandwich with just a little bit of bread on each side. Gameplay revolves around turn-based, grid-based battles where players move their units ideally strategically to defeat enemy forces. If you're rocking a room temperature IQ like me, you likely have sent your healer into the middle of battle to die, and then you get upset about it.
Why do these things always happen to me?
Each unit belongs to one of the 4 elemental affinities: earth, wind, fire, and water. This elemental system functions similarly to a rock, paper, scissors mechanic, as I said earlier, with each element being strong against one type and weak against another. This encourages players to think tactically when deploying their units, as taking advantage of elemental weaknesses can turn the tide of battle. On the other end, if enemy takes advantage of the elemental weaknesses of your characters, well, that also turns the tide of battle. Unit variety is decent, with different classes such as knights, archers, princesses, mages, and monks, each serving unique roles on the battlefield. Players can also recruit additional mercenaries from towns between battles, allowing for some customization of their army. However, character growth is somewhat limited compared to more complex RPGs, as there's no class promotions or deep skill tree. Units level up through combat, but progression feels relatively simple, making Crystal Warriors more of an introductory strategy game rather than a deeply involved experience. In many games like this, if your enemy kills an enemy, they get extra points, so you have to prioritize which units get the kills, sometimes forcing your healer to get in there and get his hands dirty. Not in this game, though. If you go up there in battle and you hit somebody, you get 4 points of experience. If you go up in battle and you kill somebody, you get 4 points of experience. If you slaughter somebody's entire family on the battlefield, you get 4 points of experience. If you trip and fall on your sword and die, you get 4 points of experience. Oh, and you level up every 10 points of experience, and this doesn't change. It's always 10 points. One of the more unique mechanics in Crystal Warriors is its monster recruitment system. During battles, players can capture wild monsters and use them as additional units in their army. This adds an extra strategic layer, as different monsters have their own elemental affinities and abilities, and this allows for some interesting tactical combinations. And it actually helps characters that don't have necessary affinities to have those. And that's really pretty well thought out for such an early RPG on the Game Gear. Graphically, Crystal Warriors is impressive for such an early Game Gear title. The character sprites are detailed and colorful, and battle animations, while minimal, effectively convey combat actions. You can tell what's happening there. The environments, though somewhat repetitive, provide enough variety to keep things visually interesting. The game's soundtrack is solid, featuring catchy battle themes that complement the fantasy setting, though the limited audio capabilities of the Game Gear mean the compositions lack the depth of console RPGs from the same era. Even still, the songs are surprisingly robust for the little Game Gear. The biggest drawback of Crystal Warriors is its lack of storytelling depth and somewhat simplistic mechanics. The mechanics are definitely deeper than the story, but they're still somewhat shallow. While the elemental affinity system adds some strategy, battles can become repetitive due to limited unit variety and basic AI. The enemy forces rarely exhibit advanced tactics, often making straightforward approaches viable for most encounters. Enemies will run right into the meat grinder that is your army, and that just makes it predictable. Additionally, while the game offers a good challenge early on, experienced strategy RPG players may find it lacking in complexity compared to later titles in the genre, which shouldn't surprise anybody. Despite these shortcomings, Crystal Warriors remains a fun and accessible strategy RPG for the Game Gear. Its simple mechanics and elemental system make it easy to pick up, while its grid-based battles provide a satisfying level of tactical engagement. It may not reach the heights of Shining Force or Fire Emblem, but for those looking for an early handheld strategy RPG with an enjoyable combat system, Crystal Warriors is a worthwhile experience. Fans of the genre will appreciate its historical significance, while newcomers may find it a great entry point into turn-based tactics. The best thing I can say about it is that it's appropriately simple for a handheld tactical RPG released so many years ago, and that's not a bad thing at all. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you. I appreciate you considering my content and investing your time in it. I have several other similar videos dedicated to RPGs by system and plenty more to come. If you've enjoyed this so far, consider checking out some of my other videos and consider subscribing. I really do appreciate you. Thank you. Let's continue. Defenders of Oasis. Released in 1992 for the Sega Game Gear, Defenders of Oasis is a straight-up turn-based RPG that brings brings a rich Arabian Nights-inspired setting to the Sega handheld. One of the cool things about this game is that it was developed by Sega themselves, and from what I'm learning, what I've experienced so far, given games like Dark Wizard and Phantasy Star, Sega absolutely makes some banger RPGs in-house. Good job, Sega. Anyway, the game combines a straightforward yet engaging combat system and surprisingly compelling story and colorful graphics that deliver an RPG experience that stands out among the limited number of role-playing games available for the Game Gear. As far as US releases go, I think this is the only traditional turn-based JRPG on the Game Gear. While it lacks the complexity of home console RPGs, Defenders of Oasis makes up for it with a charming presentation and an accessible, well-paced adventure that is comparable to a simple NES or Master System RPG. And that's great. The story follows the Prince of Shanadar, a small kingdom threatened by the forces of the evil Ahriman, not to be confused with Saruman.
Gibbets and crows.
After an attack on his homeland, the prince embarks on a journey to thwart the dark forces alongside his allies, a fearless thief, a strong-willed genie, and a loyal sailor. The narrative is simple yet effective, drawing on 1001 Nights, Persian mythology, and classic heroes' journey tropes to create a surprisingly engaging narrative. Like many RPGs of its time, Defenders of Oasis is relatively linear, keeping the player focused on the main plot without unnecessary distractions or side quests. And I don't think that's a terrible thing for a handheld RPG. It's just a dose of RPG on the go, and that's fine. Again, gameplay follows a traditional turn-based RPG structure, with players exploring towns, dungeons, and overworld areas while engaging in random battles. Combat is straightforward, but hey, it's satisfying, allowing players to attack, use magic, and defend. The inclusion of a genie as a party member adds an interesting twist as he functions separately from the main party. It can be equipped with different items like metal plating to beef him up, but he doesn't actually level with the party. Character progression is based on experience points and leveling up, aside from the genie obviously, that I just mentioned, with new abilities and stat boosts earned at set intervals. While the mechanics are simple compared to more complex RPGs, they are well balanced for a handheld experience. One of the game's biggest strengths is its visual presentation. The Game Gear's color palette is used effectively to bring the Arabian-themed world to life, with bright, detailed sprites and well-designed environments that make the game feel particularly vibrant. Character and enemy designs are expressive, and the game's animation, while limited, does a good job of conveying the action. The soundtrack is also a highlight, featuring a mix of adventurous and mystical tunes that complement the game's Middle Eastern-inspired setting. However, Defenders of Oasis does have some drawbacks. The game features random encounters at a fairly high rate, which can become repetitive over time, especially in longer dungeon sections. Inventory management is also somewhat cumbersome due to limited space, requiring players to frequently manage their items and equipment. Additionally, while the game does include a save feature, it only allows for a single save file, which can be inconvenient for players who want to experiment a little bit with, whatever, like maybe different strategies. Of course, random battle fatigue can be remedied somewhat if you're emulating by simply fast-forwarding through battles to make them, a little faster. Regarding a single save file, hey, if you're emulating, you can just make separate save states. Emulating doesn't really fix the item management though, and it does sort of suck. It's not horrible, don't get me wrong, it's just a slight inconvenience, at least as far as I experienced. Despite these minor flaws, Defenders of Oasis is certainly one of the best RPGs on the Game Gear, and it's still lauded as such. People seem to really enjoy this game. It was well received then, and, by my understanding, it's well respected now for what it is. It offers a unique setting, an engaging if simple story, and solid turn-based combat that feels well suited for handheld play. While it may not have the depth of RPGs on home consoles, it delivers an enjoyable and well-paced adventure that makes good use of the Game Gear's capabilities. For fans of classic RPGs looking for a portable experience with a distinct setting, Defenders of Oasis is, dare I say it, a hidden gem. I say this all regarding handheld stuff, but of course if you're emulating, almost every retro RPG is a portable experience now. At least you can still pretend it's only portable, right? If that makes you feel better, it's good. Give it a go. This next game on the list is, of course, the one I recommend above all others for the Sega Game Gear RPG list. If you're familiar with the series this game came from, then you will be pleasantly surprised to see how much of that series they packed into this little tiny cart. I'm, of course, talking about Shining Force, the Sword of Haja. Released in 1994 for the Sega Game Gear, Shining Force, the Sword of Haja is a tactical RPG that serves as a sequel to Shining Force Gaiden, and, I guess, a midquel to Shining Force 2. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, especially pronunciation. I guess Haja, can you hear me? As a part of the broader Shining Force series, it retains the core elements that made the franchise popular and good. Grid-based tactical battles, a compelling fantasy storyline, and a diverse cast of characters, while being designed for that thick Game Gear. Whew. Despite the hardware limitations of the Game Gear, the Sword of Haja delivers a satisfying and well-balanced strategy RPG experience that's pretty daggone meaty for a handheld RPG of the time. The story follows Deanna, a young warrior caught in the struggle struggle between the kingdoms of Cyphus and Niom. I guess that makes you like a random person that's just there to see the story play out. I'm cool with being the cameraman, I guess. It's fine. I don't always have to be the chosen hero or whatever. Or do I? The titular sword of Haja, a powerful relic, is stolen by enemy forces, and Deanna, along with his allies, must reclaim it to prevent a dark prophecy from unfolding. While the narrative may not be as deep as those... Come on, Lee, you can do it. Come on, Jeffrey, you can do it. While its narrative may not be as deep as those in its console counterparts, it remains engaging, offering enough twists and character moments to players invested throughout the campaign. Think relatively. The Genesis versions have a stronger narrative for the most part, and this is a bit of a bite-sized adventure for a bite-sized, or maybe a big bite handheld, so it's appropriate. Gameplay is where the Sword of Haja truly shines. If you're familiar with Shining Force on the Genesis, you know exactly what you're in for, and that's awesome. Battles take place on a grid-based map, with players controlling a diverse army of heroes, as I said before, each with unique abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. The game follows the traditional turn-based combat system seen in the Shining Force series, requiring players to position units strategically, take advantage of terrain, and balance offense and defense. Units gain experience and level up through combat, less when you heal and hit, and more when you kill. Eventually, this makes the troops stronger, and it even allows them to promote to more powerful classes. The game's difficulty is well balanced up to a point. Now, I honestly haven't experienced this yet, but I was reading Sega Retro's article about it, and it cracked me up. Apparently, in the US version, farther along in the game, the damage for Blaze 3 and Freeze 3 has been ramped into oblivion for your characters and for the enemy characters. It apparently also even hits a larger group than it does in the Japanese version. With this sort of power in play, it's just waiting to see who will drop the first atomic bomb on the battlefield, as it could wipe out multiple units in one hit. That's hilarious and frustrating to think about. Tread carefully, I guess. All wizards are rocking Fireball in this campaign, baby. Typically, the game would provide enough challenge to keep players engaged without becoming frustrating, and it does. Certainly, the hours I put into it surely did. The AI is competent, forcing players to think tactically rather than simply rushing into battle. The game allows fallen characters to be revived between battles for a cost. While this is a step away in difficulty from games like Fire Emblem and their permadeath system, and I certainly appreciate how much Fire Emblem makes me think strategically, this system instead encourages experimentation with different units without the fear of permanently losing a favorite character. Just rush in there and mollywop somebody is necessary. It'll be okay. It'll work out in the end.
I didn't hear no bell.
Visually, the Sword of Haja is just impressive. It is so impressive. It's clear that it's making use of the Game Gear's hardware. Character portraits are sort of what blew me away. They look so detailed and expressive on the Game Gear. And while battle animations are minimal compared to its console counterparts, they are still so cool looking on the Game Gear, even if they are toned down to meet the hardware limitations. The environments are varied enough to keep battles visually interesting. It's even neat seeing how each battle flows into the next, from an assault on a fort into chasing a thief outside the wall in just the first two battles. The overall presentation captures the classic Shining Force aesthetic despite the limitations of the system. The music is another highlight, featuring a strong soundtrack that carries the same heroic and adventurous music found in other Shining Force titles. The limitations of the Game Gear sound chip do result in a lower quality audio experience compared to the Genesis games, but the compositions themselves remain catchy and fitting for the game's tone. I know I sound like a broken record at this point regarding this, but it's simply just an impressive use of music, even if repetitive, for the Game Gear hardware. One of the main drawbacks for the Sword of Haja is its lack of exploration, I guess you would say. Unlike Shining Force on the Genesis, which allows for some free movement between battles at times, this game follows a more linear structure, progressing directly from one battle to the next with only brief story interludes in between. I actually don't particularly mind this. That's probably not a particularly popular opinion among RPG fans, but I don't always have to have a huge world or a huge town to explore. It's fine. Sometimes, especially when the combat is so fun like this game, other stuff feels like filler. To be fair though, while this keeps the pace brisk and focuses on strategy, it also means that elements like standard side quests and town interactions are largely absent. A problem in the past, I imagine, would have been the Game Gear's small screen, which can make viewing the battlefield somewhat restrictive. Fortunately, the game compensates with a clean and functional interface, ensuring that commands and unit statistics remain easy to access. Beyond this, if you emulate it, it's not so much of a concern anyway, since you can just play on large screens. It really does seem though that they looked at these concepts in consideration when making the game, as the battlefield sprites look nice even when really shrunken down, and the menus abbreviate some of the words for actions, since it would be difficult to read them if they were fully spelled out. Another awesome thing is how pretty portraits look on a small screen or on a large screen. Clearly, they mastered pixel art for this series because it never fails to impress, regardless of whether or not it's on the Game Gear or on the Sega Genesis. Despite some minor issues, Shining Force The Sword of Haja is a standout strategy RPG on the Game Gear and stands strong when considered against other entries in the excellent Shining series. It successfully distills the core mechanics of the franchise into a compact experience that is both accessible and challenging, even if eventually nutty. It's incredibly easy to recommend this game to RPG lovers due to its overall excellence and impressive adaptation to handheld hardware. It's The Sword of Haja, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Blaze 3.